All right, let's bring you other news now. Black smoke billowed from the chimney atop the Sistine Chapel just before 12 o'clock South African time, signalling that the cardinals locked in that conclave have not yet chosen a new pope to guide the Roman Catholic Church. Thousands of faithful gathered in St. Peter's Square, watching closely as the smoke emerged from the flute of the chapel's roof, signalling the end of the morning voting session, during which 2 ballots were cast. Lyndon Nisi is our reporter tracking that story, and he told us there was a sigh of disappointment there in St. Peter's Square when the black smoke was seen billowing from the top of that building there. But let's bring in Father Russell Pollitt. He's a parish priest of the Holy Trinity Church. Joins us via our video link in Braamfontein. Father Pollitt, it's great to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed for joining us. And were you part of that collective sigh of disappointment just before 12 o'clock this afternoon when it was black smoke that emerged?
Good afternoon, Michelle, and also to all your viewers. Yeah, I mean, I think we're all waiting and we want to know who it's going to be. But I think realistically, I don't think if I was a betting man, I don't think we're going to see white smoke today. Who knows? It's a guessing game. We just don't know. But I suspect that more likely tomorrow.
Yeah, I was going to say it's probably not something we should ethically be betting on. But yes, that is what our guests have been telling us, that we'll likely see an outcome tomorrow. So there are, according to some analysis, 4 favorites emerging to succeed Pope Francis. What's your take on this, especially in a context where 108 of the 133 cardinals that are locked there in the Sistine Chapel were actually appointed by Pope Francis?
Yes, it's very interesting. You know, I want to begin by saying the Italians have this wonderful saying. They say the ones who go into the conclave Pope come out cardinal, because we just don't know. But of course, there are people that are favorites. Many analysts would say yesterday, even the sermon in the Basilica, the direction that, if one was listening carefully, Cardinal Ray pointed at, he was sort of saying his favorite is Cardinal Parolin, who is as well chairing that conclave or presiding over it at the moment, because he's the oldest of the cardinals. You know, there are people that are well known, that their positions are well known, that they hold offices in the church. They've played roles in politics, like Cardinal Zuppi, who's one of those as well, who Pope Francis sent to Ukraine on a mission of peace. So there are people that are well known. I think the fact that Pope Francis appointed 108 of these cardinals indicates that they would be of perhaps a mind like his, that they would be thinking of the church in the same way that he was thinking the direction of the church should go. On the other hand, each man comes there with his own strengths, with his own experience, with his perhaps even his own vision for the future. So it is very difficult to tell until we see who the man is and hear the name that he's chosen, just how he will build on that legacy, if he'll take a different direction, or what he will decide to do.
Mm-hmm. What I found quite interesting from the range of people we've spoken to from the Catholic Church is, and even some of the cardinals on the streets of Rome yesterday, speaking to our reporter, telling him that, you know, not a lot of people, not many cardinals are actually putting up their hands to be Pope. Do you find that interesting?
I find that quite a relief in some ways, to be honest. Yes, but it is interesting. I mean, if one thinks about the magnitude of the role that this person is going to play. I mean, first of all, it's not just the leader of 1.4 billion Catholics across the world, but the Pope plays an important role globally in terms of, we've had popes go to the UN, we've had popes who have sent peace missions. So I think he's a global figure. And I also think he's dealing with the church that has become much more diverse. The church is growing in the Southern Hemisphere. We are looking at a bigger diversity of cultures. We know too that there are some divisions in the church itself between those who would like to see a more progressive church, those who want a more conservative church. So for one man, I mean, this is going to be a massive institution at this time to kind of lead. And so I would suspect that anybody who is of sound mind wouldn't really want to take that on. I mean, you could just imagine the sleepless nights this poor person is going to have.
Yeah. And it's interesting that it's accurate, obviously, that you're saying, Father Pollitt, that one man is going to take on this position. It will obviously not be one woman. Of the 133 cardinals, of course, women cannot be cardinals because they cannot be appointed as priests or bishops. You'll forgive me if my terminology is off. I'm not Catholic. But that's a massive gap, isn't it? In a church where more than half of the congregation around the world are women.
Yes, Michelle, you point to something which I think very accurately, something which I think is important, that we do have probably much more than half of our congregations across the world. Women are the backbone of the church. And the church's tradition has been that only men can be priests and therefore bishops and archbishops and popes, because Jesus himself only called 12 men, 12 apostles. And this has brought a lot of pain to, I think, women in the church. And we saw under the papacy of Francis the beginnings of a shift in that. So, for example, we never had women working in the Vatican's offices, in the Curia in Rome. Pope Francis appointed women to key positions in that Curia in Rome. And so we saw an opening there. Pope Francis also set up commissions to talk about ordaining women deacons, doing research about that, because we do know that there were women deacons in the early church. The scriptures testify to this. Phoebe was one of the first woman deacons in the New Testament. So I think this is something that the church is going to have to face, something the church is going to have to continue to talk about. Pope Francis has opened the door for that. Some would say, great, he did that. Others would say he didn't go far enough. But certainly it is not an issue anymore like John Paul II, who just said, we can't talk about this. It's not in the church's ability to talk about this. So I think that is going to have to shift. And I think the next pope is going to also have to give attention to this issue.
Yeah. There's also, of course, the issue of whether we will see the first black pope coming out of this session of the cardinals. And perhaps that's not accurate, because I do know that there were, in the history of the Catholic Church, black popes many, many hundreds of years ago. But the Ghanaian Peter Turkson is being touted as someone that could become the first black pope. He's been leading sort of in various ways, leading the pack. I think he's one of the sort of top 4 that have been named that could emerge as the next pope. What's your take on how important this would be, Father Pollitt? Because 1 in 5, I believe, is the number. 1 in 5 members of the Catholic Church are in the global south?
Absolutely. And that's where the church is growing, the global south. Africa and Asia are the main parts of the world where there's a decline in the church in the northern hemisphere, in Europe and in North America. There is this rise in the church, which plays a very important role on this continent in terms of education, in terms of health, in terms of looking after migrants, refugees, trying to also be reconcilers in conflict. So I think it would be very symbolic if the Pope did come from the Southern Hemisphere. And I think if he came from this continent, that would be wonderful. It would be a recognition of this continent and the fact that, you know, Africa is where there is a youthfulness in the church. My one caution would be, and I think I've been saying this a number of times, it would be great, and I don't want to deny that, and it's quite possible that we may have an African pope. But I think at this stage as well, we need to think of someone who not only can lead the church, but someone as well who can play on the world stage. And therefore, I think we must be very careful of being kind of continental or nationalistic, because I think that a good leader who can speak into the vacuum that we see in the world at the moment in leadership, and a world, no doubt, which is moving, it seems, into more division and war, if one looks at what's happening in India and Pakistan, is going to be more important than where he actually comes from. That said, it would be wonderful to have a pope from Africa.
Father Russell Pollitt, it's been a great pleasure talking to you this afternoon. Thanks for giving us that perspective on what's unfolding there in the Vatican City, in the Sistine Chapel specifically. Father Pollitt is from the Holy Trinity Catholic Church in Braamfontein, and it was just before 12 o'clock this afternoon that we saw black smoke emerging from the Sistine Chapel there, signaling that the vote for the next Pope is yet to be successful.